Hello there, welcome to Penpositive. This is Vinod, and
Hello everyone, this is Usha.
so we are planning to have a new series in this channel. So every week we wanted to take one topic and chat about it because we have been working in the corporate sector for a long time, and it's not about telling how things should be there. It's just going back 20, 25 years of what we've been as working as professionals, looking back at some of those basic elements and seeing what we could have done better, what we could do better in the future, and if there is anything that we have learned over our professional lives. So we're going to start with communication. I'll start with Usha. Give a quick idea of what communication. When you hear the word communication, what comes into your mind?
Communication means exchanging of views, information, anything that sharing.
What comes into your
communicating.
mind? Not what communication is. What comes into your mind when say you're sleeping and someone comes and say communication, and what is the first thought that comes into your mind?
It makes me say something.
Okay.
So if suppose somebody, just like as you said, I would say what to communicate, right? Because I'm looking for a topic then. And if there is no topic, there could be current affairs, something related to something that popped up in the news, or so basically for me communicate is talk,
Okay.
which can be type, because we are in that modern world.
Not listen.
Communication is always listen, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a two-way, right? You say, somebody has to listen, and when that somebody responds to you, you have to listen. So
Yeah. So there is listening, and there is so there are many aspects of communication when I look at it. One is this whole aspect of conveying something to someone, right?
correct.
So that could be speech, uh, like spoken, written, or even non-verbal cues that
Gestures.
gestures that would convey certain things to people. And that's one part of communication. But the other part is listening, right? To be able to, if you tell me something, I should be able to get that information in the same way that you intend
To convey.
to convey, right? And that does not happen many times.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, sometimes you are not communicating in the way that you are supposed to because of language barrier.
Yeah, because when you talk to someone, you don't have that command over the language. So sometimes, and even cultural and language barriers would be there in terms of conveying that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Sometimes when we are trying to convey a point, we say so many things, or we bring so many background effects to it, that the main point gets lost. So that's also not very helpful to communicate what you're trying to communicate.
It's not crisp and clear and concise to the point.
To the point.
And and that's an interesting thing, because many times we beat around the bush. We don't get to the point because maybe our knowledge in that area might be less.
Knowledge then also depends who you are communicating to, right? If you feel how the other person is going to take what you're trying to convey, if somewhere in your mind you're doubtful about the reaction of it, then definitely you are going in circles and not
True.
coming to the point.
True, because you don't know, if I say it as it is, how is that going to be taken by the other person.
Correct.
So we kind of put margins to what we are saying.
We try to make it look good as per us, because you are communicating, so you think if I put it here, this makes sense, but you don't know how the other person is interpreting that particular way of communication, because they might be looking at completely opposite, and that was not your intention.
No, but that is an important aspect in professional life, right? Because when we are communicating to someone as a peer, right? Working with us together. Then you're speaking to someone higher up in the ladder. Maybe you're speaking to or communicating to, say, someone in the SVP, CXO kind of, and and the way we communicate is different there, right?
Correct.
Because when you talk to a peer, you communicate, you kind of have more time.
You have more liberty to express. I
Liberty,
feel,
yes.
because you both work in the same environment and you can talk about certain thing which relates to them also. So you get to hear their opinion as well. You get to share yours also. So it's kind of coming together. As opposed to when you're doing with your higher ups, like SVP or VP, then it's more of concise, crisp, and only the topic that is related to. Because you're very conscious that you're not doing some random talks there, right?
Because we don't have the window that we have in terms of the attention span of someone.
Very short.
Because you want them to get to the point. No, they want you to get to the point, and you want them to understand exactly what the issue is and take an action, because you know that there's so much little time that you will get to tell something, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things, as when I look back at my profession, I think one of the things that I tell people also is that if they're starting their profession, while it's very good to tell a story, and we all need to tell a story because stories stick with people, there are points in professional life where you don't have that time to tell a story. You have to just
make it happen in such a way that it's favorable to you. At the same time, it's making an impact.
right. So that I think when I look at it, I see communication as a whole spectrum of things. Like, there is one way you communicate, there is a different way you communicate. The situation matters, the context matters, the people matter, culture matters, language
itself.
matters, right? If I'm going to speak something in Malayalam, or you're going to speak something in Hindi, it's very different from how we would communicate the same thing in English,
Yes.
right? My first language is Malayalam. English is my is the official language, or my professional language, the way I've been communicating. That's also been the medium in which I've studied. But I don't really think, maybe some professional aspects I might think in English, but other than that, my personal thought is always in Malayalam. And so when I communicate something on a professional level, English is the most apt language for me, because I've learned that in English and I want to communicate that in English. But at the same time, if I'm going to tell something personally about me, or talk about me, or tell my story, I think I would always prefer Malayalam as a language, because that's the way I remember, and that's the way my memory is structured.
Right.
Right?
And I think many people coming outside of English country, I feel, would go through that, because even if we say we come from English medium education, it's there itself has made it that when it's school, it's this language. When it's at home, it's this language. When you're with your friends, it's completely different language. Because I grew up in Pune, where it need not be that person will be from Kerala who's speaking Malayalam, which is my mother tongue. But there will be people from different states of India who don't just speak Hindi, but Marathi, Telugu, Tamil. So, when you are conversing with these kids who might have just left their state because their parents got posted, then, it becomes the same situation for them.
Yeah, because depending on the people, as we grow up, I remember, when I talk to friends, when I talk to my parents, when I talk to the seniors within our community or family, how I speak, to a total stranger, how I speak, friends, school teachers in school, how I speak. So there's a whole spectrum of how we even communicate with all these people, even if it's the same language.
Yes.
Right? And whenever I talk about communication, I hear people, I can figure out that people are hearing language. But that's not the thing, because so then a lot of people think that, okay, right, I don't speak English fluently. I don't speak English well. So that is a problem for me to communicate. But I think I think we pick up the language enough for us to communicate when we are given that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I've seen people, I studied in an English medium school, but I've seen people who studied in Malayalam medium schools. But even then, they reach a point, they pick up English, and then after, there comes a stage in career where it is not the language that matters. It's what you say, what
How
you
you
use.
say.
Yeah, how do you say and what you use that language for. Right? You could have the best accent or the most apt accent according to people. For example, even now there are words in English that I use that people would say that's not exactly how it is pronounced. But it really doesn't matter as long as you're conveying something. Not that you don't have to. You can if there is the right way of pronouncing something. It's always good to learn that. But you don't know that doesn't mean that you cannot communicate, because I think if you look at a lot of successful people around the world in an English speaking world that they have succeeded in, I mean you can always find a lot of people who speak maybe better English than them. So language should not be a barrier for anyone to communicate.
Yeah, and it's not something that you have to judge on, right? Because as I said, communication is basically to convey. And when I'm trying to convey you something, you should be focused on what she's trying to say as opposed to how she's saying, right? Like, what did you say? Like, for example, schedule, right? English language comes from Britishers for us. So there was a certain way of pronouncing certain words.
I learned,
Schedule.
we learned schedule.
Schedule.
And now we say schedule.
Because now we have been in the North American side of it for so long, and then and more or less I feel we pick up language, right, as we are in our profession dealing with people, and sometimes we pick up things, pronunciation mainly, and then you become part of it. And I always feel that's what has happened with me personally, because for example, expiry, right? Expiry is such a funny thing, which I feel when I came to Canada, and I'm in one of my jobs where we're looking at expiry date for a person, which means the person has passed away. And when I'm conveying that, we are getting expired people's name. People laughed at me.
Yeah, because we grew up saying expired, right?
Expired
Someone
is
expired.
Respectfully saying that
Someone passed away.
We don't say passed away. Passed away is very, we felt it's such a common thing that we use for like he passed away, right?
No, we also use passed away in the, for example, high school. You passed out of high school.
Yeah.
We don't say graduated. We say pass out. Pass
out. Yeah. In fact, if you say pass out here, people will say you were high drinking and you passed out, which is throwing up or whatever, right? Yeah. So those are the challenges that we had. When I said expired, everybody laughed at me. And then when I asked what's so funny, they said, did you mean that the person passed away? And in my mind, because for me, it's very clear, English comes from this place and this is how language is. So I started laughing at them, like how weird that you don't use this, but you use this, right? So when you are with such people and at that time you have to convey something to them, you come to that level where you will say the words which they will understand. Because now my criteria is my communication should be clear enough so they understand what I'm trying to say, rather than teaching them English or those kind of things.
Right. So I think when I said language should not be a barrier, I also acknowledge that language is a barrier for a lot of people.
Yes.
See, I speak English, I speak Malayalam, I can speak Hindi, but there are languages Tamil I might be able to understand but not speak. If I am put in say I go to Europe, when we went to Europe a few years back, if I'm in Germany and I don't understand German, obviously that is going to impact the way I live, or not just communicate, but how I get around doing things in that country. Yeah. So language definitely is a factor, but it's something that everyone can pick up and learn, because we have seen people who don't know a language go to a place, and if their job and their livelihood demands that they should learn that language, then they will easily learn that language. I've seen people move to some countries, but they don't have a need to learn that new language, so they don't learn, right?
Yeah.
So that also happens a lot. In India, you can see for example, I was in Bangalore for on and off, probably about 10-11 years, but I don't speak Kannada, because I did not have to speak Kannada in order to go about my activities in the state. And there are many cases like that. People who on and off go,
Yeah.
they should be able to do things with Hindi and English. You are able to kind of go this way, that way,
Yeah.
anywhere in India. But that's not the case when you go to Europe. That's not the case when you go to other countries. You have to know their language. There is a cultural problem also in communication. Understanding that is a big thing. So at least so we want to kind of make these videos like not that long, but when we start talking, it goes on and on. And I don't know if we have been able to communicate what we are
Trying to come.
but we did not have a plan to communicate anything specific. We wanted to share some thoughts on communication. Next week we'll take another topic and we'll talk about it. But to end it, I wanted to, for people who are currently in their college or starting their career, what would be your advice to them on communication?
My advice would be, first is listen carefully when you are, because you are one of those sponges where you are learning things. So be that sponge, absorb as much as you can, process it, because I feel new mind, new generation has got more creative ideas than what we people have, right? How we categorize now millennials, newsies and all that. So articulate it, bring up your thought process to it, and then when you're processing and giving it back, be able to communicate it in that way that the person can understand. Because generational gaps are there, but I don't think there is anything impossible as to convey what you want to say, right? It's how you say or the words what you use, right? So that's one thing I would like to say. Another thing I feel like is always communicate, because I feel as the new generation is coming, right, the communication is going down. People are always listening or being in their own world. Sometimes it's just gestures with which you are saying you're going, you're coming, or even in many ways of communication is like, I feel we are using less words, more gestures, which may not be very convenient for other people to understand. So I think communication is very important, and it's always good to convey, but listen as well.
Yeah. So for me, when I look at, and I'm saying this not to necessarily to people who are in college or starting their career now, but I'm looking at, if I was in college and to my younger self, what would I tell? I would say read more. I would say write more, because, and now it's even more important because we don't have to write. And writing is a process in which we have to think, we have to articulate, we have to make things concise. So there's a double process that is happening. So we would have heard people say, he speaks without thinking, because you don't need to think in order to speak. But to write, unless you think about it, you cannot write anything.
Yes.
Right? So that process will help people kind of observe, because you need a lot of patience to write. You don't need a lot of patience to speak. So when you do this process of writing, it allows you to think, which means that even when you are speaking, you would have had this whole writing process and thinking process as a habit for yourself. So you'd be able to speak more concisely. Now, that's one thing. And I think I would say take a communication course. Or rather, even if you don't want a course, because I don't know what kind of courses are available, and I don't have any recommendations or anything like that. But I think trying to talk to some other person, if there's a language that you want to say if you feel that your knowledge of English is something that is impeding your way of communicating, you should probably go ahead and start talking to someone else who also wants to thinks that way, and then you can start communicating English, writing in English, or any language for that matter. And then listening. One of the key aspects that I would have I will tell my younger self is to listen more, which because that's one thing that even now I struggle with, and being actively listening. And now we have phone and the gadgets and everything. We are not attentive. We sometimes become disrespectful looking at the phone when someone is talking to us. We don't get all those understand exactly what they're saying. I think when you should have communication as part of your personal development activity. There is only this much that in a video or someone else in a class can tell you, but as you observe your way of communicating, as you observe how other people are speaking, as you observe the non-verbal cues that other people give you, it gives you an idea of how you need to develop yourself, because you're the only person who can develop yourself on that. So I think it's a lifelong activity.
Absolutely.
Kickstart early, it becomes better and easy. Because
and I would like to add to yours +1 for the writing part, because I figure, like, when you are in the beginning starting your career, probably it's not much, but then as you grow in, you have to be very concise, crisp. How we were talking in the beginning of this video is very important, because and as you learn, you will figure out, if you go back and check your previous writings, you will see how many this you were using unnecessarily, and the sentence grows big and big, and the reader gets lost in the way, right? So that's one thing which I have learned, and that's what I would tell in my younger, that have to be more cautious about when you're saying things. I told this, and so hence that, right? So many things we just add on the way, which is very unnecessary.
Short sentences. And also to add, so vocabulary, right? So we always think that having better vocabulary is good for our communication. Yes, from a writing perspective, it definitely does. But at the same time, even if your vocabulary is not that much, you still can communicate.
Yes.
And sometimes it is even better, because you are talking in words that everyone can understand. You're not using words that other person has to go and fetch in a dictionary, right? So not knowing a lot of words in English is not necessarily a bad thing. It's question of, do you know sufficient words in a language to communicate what you want to communicate is the only thing that matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't have to use hard words for which, like, somebody has to go and look, because then, the interest and the flow that was in the communication is lost, because now you are going and searching for that one word.
Yeah.
Then you come back and then you're trying to relate the whole communication, the sentences, you lose the interest. Language or anything, when you say communication, it has to be simple. Any common man should be able to understand. That should be the language, I feel, when you're communicating, whether writing or even speaking.
Our goal in communication is not to prove to the other person how much of language we know.
Yes.
And how good we are, how proficient we are. It is to convey a certain thing and ensure that they understand it the same way that we want to convey, and they can respond back, and we can have that passage of message either side. So one more thing before closing, I want to say one more thing. As you learn a new language, as you move into a professional life, as you go there, you would probably create two different identity of yourself, which, if you guys have seen our Malayalam videos, this is not the way we would talk in our Malayalam video. There is, and not that we can't talk like that in English, but here the topic was, for some reason, we felt it was more serious, or maybe unconsciously, subconsciously, this whole idea that we have to be professional in speaking.
It's like what I said, when you're speaking English, we were in school, right? And then
at work.
So that's why that bifurcation comes there.
Yeah. So I think that also would be there, because there are people who would talk to you, listen to you, and say, I mean, is this how you speak in office? And then, no, that's not how you speak in office. In office, you speak in a different way.
Yeah, you're much friendlier, same thing. as we mentioned about the peers and your seniors
Yeah.
and your managers.
So communicate with others, and we'll see you all next week with some other topic. If you have any suggestions for topic, just
Yeah, please share with us
add
so
that.
we can come up with.
Yeah. So I wanted to finish this video in 10 minutes, but it's 25 minutes. So we'll talk as long as we want, and I will also have this on a podcast available. So if you really want to only listen to it, then we'll make some arrangement. I'll put that on the show notes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you like it. Give us suggestions, feedback. We'll be happy to adapt.
Thank you.
Thank you.